This is a very interesting situation we find ourselves in. Interesting because we have dilly-dallied over this issue for the last 15 years or so, beginning with the toll debt recovery debt under President Kufuor to this day. We have lacked the courage or the necessary political will to tackle energy issues headlong. Let me start with the additional 1 cedi tax, and let me state that it is not a new tax. The energy sector shortfall and debt recovery levy has been on the books for a while. So it's just been increased from 95 pesos to 1 cedi 95 pesos. So again, let's get it clear, it's not a new tax. Why did the government have to do this? Let me concede, and I'm not in government, I'm speaking purely as a consultant and a private person. I hold no executive position whatsoever. Let me concede that the communication could have been better. Preparatory work could have been better. But it is also absolutely necessary. The main fuel for our power plants happens to be gas, natural gas. That is the main fuel for our power plants. But the supplementary fuels have been light crude oil, heavy residual fuel oil, and diesel. The thermal plant owned by VRA, its secondary fuel is diesel, which is far more expensive than the residual fuel oil that AXA, for example, uses. But most of the plants, their main supporting fuel is light crude oil. We still don't have absolute control over natural gas. Plants go down for maintenance, both planned and unplanned. Both the one at the Ghana gas plant and the ENI plant on board their FPSO. Then we still import some amount of gas from Nigeria. So these are our 3 main gas sources. Part of the challenge we face is that even domestic gas is expensive, because the ENI gas is not associated gas, it's standalone gas. And therefore, all the cost recovery is on the back of gas. So that makes it far more expensive than the tallow gas. The tallow gas is associated gas. It's gas we find in association with crude oil. So the expense is on crude oil. So the gas becomes more or less a bonus. And therefore the cost is lower. A byproduct. In fact, it's not a byproduct. It comes with it. And we build the cost recovery on the crude. And so the gas price there. Unfortunately, for the last 8 years, there's been no serious exploration or additional production. We know that we still have some gas fields we have not exploited. We know that Greater Jubilee, especially the 10 field, can still come up with a lot of gas. Indeed, they are planning to inject about $2 billion into that. If that comes up with more associated gas, our weighted average cost of gas will come lower. So this is the gas situation. But As of today, if you take the electricity tariff, it does not take account of the liquid fuels that come in as backup fuel. So anytime we've had to buy liquid fuel, be it VRA, be it the IPPs, there's really no fiscal space for it in the electricity tariff. Already, the current electricity tariff is not fully cost reflective. It is not fully cost reflective. That is one leg, and I've stated elsewhere that the 1 cedi additional tax will be meaningful if we tackle the other leg of the energy sector debacle. If we don't tackle the other leg, let's take ECG and NETCO, our two primary distributing companies. They lose about 30% of the power they buy. Whether they buy from VRA or buy from IPPs. Before it gets to the consumer, and the consumer pays for it, about 30% is missing in quotes. In either technical losses or commercial losses, but the situation is that both technical and commercial losses. What margin can you put on a product to compensate for a 30% loss? You can't put a 40% margin if you go to the market. And so if we don't tackle that leg of the problem, we'll be pouring water in a basket. And for me, that is so critical. There has to be major reforms, structural, managerial, especially in the power sector. The oil sector is not exempt, and I will come to that. The inefficiency is there. But the power sector, because the power sector is really the engine of our industrial development. Our government's 24-hour economic policy will rest on the power sector. Our social development will rest on the power sector. And so it is so important we get the power sector right. We have not seriously tackled the structural and managerial deficiencies in the power sector. If we go on this as business as usual, the next another 10 years we'll come and sit here and be still discussing this. I am a social democrat. In fact, in some ways, an unrepentant socialist. But modern socialism recognizes economic fundamentals. We cannot pretend, even including the Ghanaian right, that electricity is today only a social commodity. And it is important we address this. At the time Osajifo of blessed memory constructed the VRA dam, the agreement with Kaiser, as lopsided as later we found it to be, the inflows were enough to pay for the cost, capital recovery as well as running cost. And therefore it was right for electricity to be cheap for the people of Ghana. if you locate that in its historical content, it was right. 50 years on, Akosombo is responsible for less than 40% of our electricity supply. So the electricity mix has changed completely. So Akosombo is legacy hydro. Akosombo generates at less than, I'm being very generous, less than 4 cents per kilowatt hour. It's more like 3, but I'm being generous, less than 4. Bui Power sells to ECG above 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And therefore, when it comes to legacy hydro, we cannot classify Bui as legacy hydro. In any case, it's only a peaking plant. Kondam, that has 160 megawatt signature plate, is bigger in gigawatt hours than the 400 megawatt Bui plant. And so we have to look for other alternatives. There is this idea of solar. Currently, solar suffers some huge negatives if we are using solar as base power. Storage, variability, etc. That does not mean we should not go for solar, especially individual non-grid power. If I had my own way, all government schools, all health facilities, the roofs should be populated by solar panels, so that those institutions, you don't have to connect that to the grid. So we have a serious energy challenge. But this challenge is basically economic, financial. My previous boss, Dr. Okatakyie, when I was deputy minister, once said we didn't have an energy problem, we had a financial problem. How do we get the finances? How do we pay for the energy we need to develop? And how do we make our payments cost effective? We must not pay because we must pay. There has to be some efficiency. So the first major task is to bring down the cost of production, drive down costs, and drive up efficiency, especially in the power sector. We are so inefficient. Part of it must be blamed on the shareholder, the government of Ghana representing all of us. Some pieces of equipment are depleted. They are way beyond their sell-by date. And when you have poor, old, obsolete equipment, the wastage increases. And those are technical losses. You can address the technical losses by investment. But the commercial losses, 90% of the commercial losses, in my opinion, pure thievery. There's no more polite way of putting it. Pure thievery. Thievery by all of us as a collective. Energy sector workers, especially ECG and NEDCO, are part of the stealing cabal. Their contractors, ECG, NEDCO contractors, are also part of it. Then there is the worst part, the lack of compliance enforced by ECG and NEDCO. They know which factories in Accra and Tema are stealing power. They go, they are settled on the side and they move away. And they repeat that. We also lack the political will to take the punitive measures that we have to take. If we catch a factory stealing power, it's not just a matter of a fine quietly. The fine must be such that for the next 2 years, you will still be paying part of it. We need to, and we must name and shame these big power chiefs. And then in our own localities, we know our neighbors who are still in power. You go to places, especially where the lower middle class live, have air conditioners on sometimes 12 hours in the day. There is no way they can be paying for that price if they were actually paying the right price. So we need to look at that. So for me, that is the power side. The electricity side, we can make the petroleum side. There are inefficiencies inbuilt into the price build-up. The latest price build-up was issued on 1st June. If you look at that, let me give you just 2 examples so that I don't take too much time. We have the UPPF, Uniform Petroleum Pricing Formula. The single largest OPEX, operating expense, in running transport is fuel. Fuel prices have come down by a good percentage in the last 6 weeks or so, to the extent that Ghana Private Road Transport Union and other private transport operators have reduced their prices. The UPPF figure has remained the same. Why hasn't that also come down? Remember the scandal around this UPPF. Part of it is that there's just too much juice there. So we will have to calm down, take a second look at the pricing build-up. Then there's the primary distribution margin, which is also another transportation-related margin. That has not also changed. So again, that must also come down. Then there's the elephant in the room. The premium charged by BIDEX, BDCs, OMCs. As we speak, the premiums can go as much as $400 per metric ton. And we believe with the appreciation of the currency, they should go down to below $300 per metric ton. And that will impact the pump price. So government, especially the ministries of energy and green transition and finance, there's a lot of work to be done. If we are able to do this within the next 3 months, and with the stability of the cedi, notwithstanding the additional 1 cedi, we will be able to bring petroleum pricing down considerably. So these are my initial remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.